Well, once again, I get a good opportunity for a conversation in the Shelton School District as we've been doing a series of these, kind of talking about things that have been going on since the end of the last school year, looking ahead to the start of the school year, which will be here before you know it. The back-to-school celebrations are ongoing. There's always going to be that first Friday home football game where the high school gets opened up, and the whole community is welcome to come out and check out not only the new High Climber football team, but also the clubs that are in town and things like that. Well, one of the other opportunities is to talk with kind of the upper heads of the departments here at the school district. And today's conversation is with the new executive director of finance. I probably got that wrong, but it's close enough. Clinton Sherman. Clinton, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Thanks for sitting with me here on this one.
Sure.
And I think this is just a good opportunity for me to ask you some questions about things that I see online. Unfortunately, a lot of misinformation appears to be out there regarding the school district in some aspects, and so we'll kind of go through some of those things with whatever knowledge you have when it comes to the district and where we're at. First, though, you are new to the position here relatively, so give the listeners a background of where you came from and kind of how you got to this position.
Sure. I started in educational finance in 2007 in the Royal School District, which is a little smaller community in eastern Washington and southern Grant County. Long history of crushing football games over there, a lot of championships there. And that was a learning curve. I was in charge of everything but teachers there. I learned a lot. It was a great community. Actually, that community is one of the reasons I chose Shelton, because I was looking for something a little smaller, because I really liked that sense of a community wrapping their arms around each other. After Royal, I went to the Walluk School District, which is a little farther south in Mattawa, and worked there for another 4 or 5 years. And then I became the assistant director of finance for the Richland School District, which is where I had lived the entire time. And I was just commuting back and forth for an hour or so each way. And then I did that for a handful of years and then became the executive director of financial services there. And then looked for a bit of a change. And that small town, the agility of a smaller school district is really attractive. Like I said, that sense of community in a smaller town is great. And when I had never been to Shelton before, and so I think I told you this before, but when I crested 101 and saw the Olympic Mountain Range open up, I was just shocked that everyone was just driving by. I just had never seen it like that before. It never really made it this far over. I grew up on a small farm in eastern Washington, like riding dirt bikes and raising cows and pigs and stuff. And so we never really made it over here that much when I was a kid. So I had never seen it. It was just gorgeous, and the whole area is gorgeous. And so we made the move. My family moved over here in June. I've been commuting since then, and a lot of work to do, a lot kind of stuff to unpack, and plans to put in place to get us to a space we need to be. And there's lots of reasons that Shelton was attractive. One of them is that there's like a laser focus for student outcomes here, and everybody I met the day I came through, which I'm not sure if you are even really asking this, but the day I came through and met a bunch of staff and some teachers and some principals, the union, they were all just really focused on iterating all over their work to get better all the time. And I thought it was just a really attractive thing to become a part of.
So based on the size of the Shelton School District, where does that fit into your background? Is it the smallest of the districts?
No, not at all. It's in the middle. Royal must have been around 1,200, 1,500 when I was there, while Luke was 25. Richland was 14,000. And so at Shelton's at like 4,300.
Okay.
And so it's in the middle-ish. Yeah, the non-high school districts surrounding the Shelton School District really kick up the sports participation a ton, actually.
Yeah. Explain to me a little bit about how the Shelton School District receives their income on a quarterly, monthly basis. I know we talk a lot with folks, and I talk with Superintendent Jesse about this, but it's not like you're at a business or at a restaurant where you offer a product and the consumer purchases that product, and then you get the money. And then if there's cost increases here, you just charge more for the end product. It's a different model when it comes to financing a school district.
Yeah, I mean, public education, the Washington State Constitution declares education the paramount duty of the state. And so public education is a part of that. And we get our revenue monthly from the state. The last day of each month, our revenue comes in, and that is not an even percentage or even split divided by 12. It's called an apportionment is what the revenue is called that comes to school districts. And that revenue comes in different percentage levels across the year. But that revenue is driven by our enrollment. So the more students you have, the more revenue comes in. And it can get a little complicated, but if certain students qualify for additional services, often other grants or programs generate more revenue. So a single student could drive multiple revenues. Every student's a basic ed student. That's the main money that comes from the state. There's some if a student qualifies for Title I services or LAP services or special education services, those drive additional revenues to help serve those students.
One of the things that Superintendent Jesse has reiterated over the many times that we've spoken is that the state apportionment to not just Shelton schools, but presumably schools across the state does not pencil out. It doesn't equal what your expenses
are, what our costs
are.
Yeah. And I guess I'm happy to get into the weeds about this with anybody who's interested. I've done that my whole career. Yeah. So the cost of insurance, I'm sure everyone's felt that at home, the cost of utilities, just the cost of goods that have normally been a pretty regular amount have really spiked. And we receive dollars in apportionment specifically for material, supplies, and operating costs. And those dollars just have not kept up. And then this is getting a little complicated, I guess, but there used to be a state salary schedule that every district was on the same salary schedule. And if a district wanted to pay more for their staff, they had to find another mechanism to do that. That went away with the McCleary decision. And so every school district now has independently negotiated a different contract. And regardless of the independent contracts being negotiated, the big change from McCleary was we used to get paid exactly where a teacher landed on the salary schedule. So if they had 10 years of experience and had a master's, we got that amount of money for the teacher. That's not what happens anymore. Now we receive an average, and so we receive around $77,000 to $79,000 per teacher. But the average teacher in Shelton, thankfully, it's what you want. It's a higher educated, more experienced staff. But those higher educated and more experienced staff cost a little more, which is fine. That's what you want. But they cost $96,000, and the state only gives us $77,000. So there's the difference there that has to be made up somewhere. And for every district in the state, that difference is made up by the levy.
Explain to me and the listeners too that I think a common misconception when it comes to a school district is that it's a government agency. So for some reason, there's no bills. I guess. Oh, power bill.
Sure.
Gas bill, water bill.
We are not tax exempt, even as a school district. We pay comp tax. So even if a company doesn't charge us tax, we have to calculate it and then pay it additionally to the state. We pay water, sewer, garbage, all the regular things that you would think of any industry having. We have photocopiers, we have projectors, we have bulbs for those. Just the cost to operate a school district. No matter the size, I mean, it's a substantial cost to do that. We have fuel for buses, we have diesel mechanics, we have lawnmowers, we have all those things that you would see out and about in any industry, maintaining our grounds, maintaining our buildings. We have elevators. Lots of folks have elevators. We have to keep those up and going. That's been a hot button. We've partnered with a local vendor to get those up and going. We have all the regular. Nothing is free for school districts, really. Sometimes you can use our buying power to get a little bit better of a deal. But we have regular operating costs just like any other private industry, for sure.
Where is the school district on its current financial basis. Where are you sitting as we move into this 25-26 school year? We've heard a lot of reports of deficits and things like that. Where can you tell me that, what can you explain on where the district is current in its current financial situation?
Sure. We talked about this a handful of times at the previous board meetings. We will end this year. So there's a difference between fund balance that you have, which accounts for all your liabilities, and then cash balance, which is how much you have in the bank of cash. Our fund balance, once we account for outstanding liabilities, which are bills that are owing to other vendors, we will end this year with a negative fund balance. We worked really hard this year to make reductions to our MSOC, our materials, supplies, and operating costs, try to reduce those things down. We unfortunately had to move through the RIF process in February in the wintertime. That was really difficult to do. But all of those moves really help the upcoming school year, not this school year that's just finishing. So we began this last year in a deficit. We made a lot of moves and a lot of reductions throughout the year and try to tighten our belts, sharpen our pencils, as they say. And we'll still end in a negative fund balance, but all those things that we did will manifest in next year when we'll end at a positive fund balance, about $1.6 million.
Explain to me a little about, you mentioned the fund balance and the vendors and things like that. There is talk outside the community of the vendors that you use and certain members and whatever delinquent in payments and things like that. Explain to me, I guess let's go back a little bit. Were you familiar with kind of the situation when you came into this position?
I was not aware of the full scope of the situation when I came here. I had watched some YouTube videos, Mason Web TV, which was awesome. Yeah. Actually, they're like you, Jeff. They're omnipresent. They're everywhere. And so I watched a bunch of stuff about Mason County through that, and it was another reason that it seemed like a good fit to come here, because there's a lot of really cool things happening across the area. But I watched some board meetings on Mason Web TV, and initially they had projected ending last year with $1 million fund balance, and that is too low. And really, if you're positive $1 million or you're under $1 million, your decision-making process is the same. You're having to make reductions. You're having to make really hard decisions. You're having to figure out how can you make reductions without reducing program needs that students need, because the whole reason we exist is to provide high-quality instruction and a safe space for students. And if you're a positive $1 million or negative $1 million, you're still making those same hard decisions, and that's what districts are facing across the state now. But I was not aware of the full scope until I got here, and even my first week, brand new, I was just meeting people, trying to unravel what I could see, and then every day and every week was a new realization and epiphany of what was going on.
And so when you are in that situation and you have to then go talk to Superintendent Jesse or the school board. Yeah. Explain a little bit for those who might not follow those. They are in person and on Mason Web. You can definitely check those out. Explain to me a little bit about the response that you heard from them when you explained what you were seeing now that you're in this position.
Sure. I think initially there was some surprise of what I was saying, and then I brought some numbers to them, some documents, some reports about what it looked like, and so there's a surprise, and then there was a real willingness to, and really decisive action to fix the problem of ending in a deficit. Like, what does that look like? Where are we overspending in different areas? What can we do? There was a lot of work and discussion to kind of decisively get us out of that deficit. Really, in a way I hadn't seen in other places. I mean, we're not the only district in binding conditions. Other districts are falling into it. They just did this last spring. as the finance guy, one of the things that was refreshing to me was the desire and willingness and resolve to take quick action to fix the problem. That was actually really impressive as somebody who was new and didn't know, they didn't know me, I didn't know them. And I'm just identifying a problem and with some solutions and how we build a plan to get out of that. And everybody was on board and willing to do that right away.
Once he's kind of started to see this as part of kind of how you're going to have to do your daily business, explain how does the state get involved and help with this? OSPI get involved, or where if I'm not mistaken, they're kind of overseeing some of this right now?
Yeah. So it's a tiered process. So all districts have their local ESD, Educational Service District, as a resource. And there's, I think, 9 of them throughout the state, and every district can go to those for some support and some training and help. And we've definitely done that. I've done that my whole career. I think it's really important not to work in a silo. Getting more eyes and minds on things and problems is always better. And so, yeah, OSPI, we meet with them quarterly and talk about what we've done so far, what we're projected to be doing, and just what that looks like. And then those numbers are kind of looked at and vetted by the ESD. And then they have some discussions, I'm sure. We just kind of meet with them quarterly, and it's been really a real collaboration and partnership. And yeah, it's not like no one's coming in and taking over the district, right?
That's not what's happening. It's not like a Animal House double secret probation kind of.
Right. No, that doesn't happen. I do think it could get there. Like if the board and the superintendent didn't have that decisiveness, there are tiers to what this OSPI involvement looks like. I don't know how, again, I'm real prone to go into the weeds just naturally, I think, but there are other districts who are way farther along in this process who have a lot more oversight by the state. And I don't like that because I believe in local control. I believe in community members and school districts figuring out what's best for their school district and their students and their community. And we make those decisions best because those people don't live here. And so the board made those decisions to not have to deal with those issues of someone else coming in, whereas other districts have not and are dealing with people coming in. You
undoubtedly have seen how close-knit, you mentioned it's one of the reasons why you wanted to come here, close-knit community that Shelton is. Everybody knows each other. Everybody's at all the different things. And this leads back to a previous question or a thought that we hadn't got to yet. But
sure,
when it comes to those outstanding bills to the local community members, it's got to be difficult for not only you who, whether or not people recognize you or not, you have to go shop at some of the same places perhaps
on
a personal level that the district may owe money to on a larger level. So explain a little bit about what has been done to communicate with those folks, and say, listen, this is something, we're committed to this. We have a contract with you, things like that.
So some vendors we do have contracts with. Some vendors we're just kind of using for random, whatever the need is, in the classroom or for maintenance or operations of the district, parts for a bus, whatever that looks like. And so what we've done is really reach out and call almost all of them. And some of those we partner with and figure out a way to get on the other side of, and just really expressed our value of their partnership and the work that they do. We really try to prioritize local vendors because they're in our community as well. Some other giant companies that are billion-dollar companies maybe have less priority in when we're structuring those bill payments, which when we talk to them as well, but my heart is not. Everyone will get paid, but we are prioritizing the local folks first, definitely. And like I said, we're reaching out and talking to them and letting them know what the situation is. Trying to be as communicative as possible is really what we're trying to do, and just letting everyone know what it looks like and getting caught up on all of these payments.
And once again, this is not like the state. the federal government can run deficit. We hear news reports of
Sure.
that all the time. The
Yep.
state cannot. It has to be a kind of a balanced budget every year, and that's the same with the Shelton School District, right? You can't carry a deficit on
That's
the
correct.
budget. Is that right?
That is correct. Yeah. So there are some laws around that for our state and for school districts, and that's why the state has these tiers of support. That first one being binding conditions. If a district falls into a negative fund balance or projects one at the beginning of their school year, to have one, you come in and then you have those quarterly meetings, and it, like I said, that ramps up because you're not allowed to operate in a deficit, and I don't know why you would want to.
Right.
Yeah. I'm much too fiscally conservative for that, for sure.
So now let's move on to something that people are going to have to understand and vote on here upcoming, a levy.
Sure.
And while we're not advocating either way, it's important that folks get to get the facts and make their own decisions here. Explain to me and explain to the listeners where the district is at with this new levy process. What is the ask? How is it I'm sure it's just the replacement levy here. Where does this sit? And what does this money help go to if it were to pass?
Yeah, so Shelton has a decades-long history of supporting their local schools and passing levies. And we're at the stage now that we have a budget work session today that I'll present some options for the board to take a look at. No decisions. It's a bit early for decisions. You don't take a resolution to the county for it to be put on any ballot until kind of November, December-ish. So
Okay.
We're kind of early in the process. But I will take some options for them to think about. Either, it's definitely it's a replacement levy, and there's just some options on what that looks like. And I think a couple things that are important to understand is that you levy an amount, and the rate can shift as your assessed valuation of your homes shift. And for the last handful of years, there was some real, everyone has seen just assessed valuation growth, just unprecedented growth. Last year, our area actually had a little bit of a deficit, which was it feels like a return to normal in my eyes, but that's always hard to see. So I'll bring options to the board today for them to think about, and then in the fall they'll make some decisions about what that looks like, and then we'll take it to the county and take it out to the people. And so what the levy pays for is there isn't a single thing it doesn't touch. Like earlier we talked about the salary difference between what the state gives us and also the material, supplies, and operating costs for utilities and insurance and technology. There's just a deficit from what the state provides from what it actually takes to run a school district, and especially an effective one. Like Shelton has seen outcomes better than anyone else in the state. So we want to keep providing those outcomes. So that investment in education is vital. And so it touches everything. I mean, there's the only thing it wouldn't touch is things that are funded specifically by grants. So like if it's a Title I grant program, then levy dollars aren't allowed to come in to help pay for that because you have to use those title dollars first. You can use those levy dollars to provide the same function for those students, but you would use the grant dollars first to try to make those dollars go farther. The other thing that's interesting and important, I think, to understand is that when a school district passes a levy, the state is then obligated to give you additional money because there's this funding called levy equalization. It's also called local effort assistance. And that's because there is a widespread difference in assessed valuation across the state. And when the voters pass a levy in Shelton, it obligates the state to give us an additional, like almost $8 million over the course of the levy. But if you fail the levy, then they don't have to give it to you, which I always thought was interesting, that if you don't pass your levy, you'd really need that money,
right,
but they're under no obligation to give it to you. But when the district does support it, and it basically for Shelton, what we're looking at is for every dollar that you give us, the state gives us another quarter. So you're getting a 25% return from the state like right away. And all of those dollars are vital to the function of a school district, for sure.
So let's break this down a little bit. 100% is a fully funded Shelton School District for just this upcoming school calendar year 25-26, what is the percentage of the apportionment that the state just says, well, here's your monthly money from us? What percentage of that is that?
So non-restricted state dollars, because there's also state grants, right? There's a handful of grants that are funded by the state that are you can only use those dollars to serve the function of that grant, right? So the dollars that you're talking about, which is what we'd use to pay utilities and teacher salaries, that's 57% of our budget is that level of basic education.
Okay, so 57% there. How much of that percentage then comes in? Does it go up from the current levy as it sits now within the district?
What do you mean? Say it again.
So there's if we're looking at 100% and 57% as a state, we're still 43%
sure.
short.
Okay. So
where's that other 43%?
You got it. So 22.5% of the difference is the state restricted dollars for transitional bilingual, LAP, some other handful of grants and programs. Those are restricted state dollars. About 9% comes from the local levy.
And that just means it's earmarked for a certain specific thing.
That's exactly right. Yeah. Yes. Okay. Thank you. About 9% comes from our local levy. 8% comes from the federal government, and mostly that is special education funding, title funding, and nutrition services. So the school lunches and meals. That's about 8%. And then because we serve the perimeter districts that are non-high, they give us around 2.5% as well of our budget. And then there's another fraction of like 0.5% that we're missing. That is facility rentals and fines and fees, like just a really small portion of dollars. But that's the remaining dollars.
Of the time since 2007 when you started in this type of industry and in this business, I suppose, how and especially coming from a rural similar communities in Eastern Washington, talk to me a little bit about different how the levies are looked at there. Are they passed? Is there the same support or?
Oh yeah, I mean again, that's one of the reasons I think I chose Shelton specifically, is that yes, in the smaller communities, there's a real understanding of how those levy dollars are important. Because when I say they touch everything, I mean I might even get into they're the function for all athletics, all your arts programs after school. Anything that's extracurricular is funded from the levy, and those were like in Royal specifically, like I said, they've won a lot of state championships there, and so there's a lot of support there because everyone understands what that means to their community. So not only to touch sports and teacher salaries and fuel and everything else, but there is definitely an understanding for that. And there's a dip in passing rate over COVID, which I think was expected. I mean, there's a lot of uncertainty happening then, but during the last election, there was a real bounce back to the previous norm of communities supporting their schools with their local levy, for sure.
Would you say, as you're out in the community, you guys have made a more pronounced effort out there to meet with the people across? What do you say, or what are some of the responses you give when folks say, listen, cost of everything is going higher. I got to really think about every dollar in, dollar out when it comes to my personal budget. And I'm just not sure on this. I'm just not sure on this thing. What are some of the ways that you respond to those types of?
I think it just depends on the person and how long we've been talking, really. There is this saying that great communities are built by people who plant trees whose shade they'll never feel. And this idea that you're investing in your community's future. We talked a lot about that. And like I said, Shelton has a long history of supporting it. So the tax rate that we are currently paying is $2.20 per thousand. It used to be over $4 before the levy swap and McCleary thing happened. And then it went to $1.50. Then it went to $2. Now the levy cap is at $2.50. And so when you look at it as per thousand, the local community is supported at a way higher rate for a long time. And someone did that for me in my community where I grew up, and people did that for you in your community where you grew up. That's just how communities are built. And there is some studies on local economies doing better when bonds and levies pass, because those dollars end up going back into the community, because you're building better buildings, more jobs for construction workers. When you're building buildings, you are providing higher level of quality of education, and that comes back into your community as well. So it depends. And it also depends, I ran into at the farmer's market, some folks actually can qualify for a waiver, and they can actually waive those things. There's a form you can go to the treasurer's website online and fill out a form, and you can actually waive some of those things if you can qualify. And so it just depends on who we're talking to.
And then conversely, what I'm sure over these almost 20 years in service here, you've heard stories of districts where the levies haven't passed. I talked with North Mason just a couple weeks ago, and they faced that realization that their first go around was not successful. What impacts have you heard over your time on the quality of education, or just even the mood at the district level or at the teacher level when these things aren't supported by the communities?
Yeah, I would say the ramifications of a double levy failure are felt beyond the district office and the teachers. I mean, that actually ripples out right into the community, because you can't afford. In Shelton, it's roughly $10 million total with the state dollars, with that state quarter being kicked in. It's around $10 million, and so we just faced like a $2.3 million deficit we're trying to carve ourselves out of, and we had to move through a RIF notice and that process. That was really difficult, and it's just hard to do. It doesn't feel good at all, and I mean, that would feel like a walk in the park compared to losing $10 million, right? Because a double levy failure for a school district is catastrophic. And like I said, it ripples out, because you would have to reduce your level and quality of service so much to make ends meet with the insufficient amount that the state is giving us, that it'd be felt in every function. I mean, I don't really know what else to say more about it. It would be felt in the community, in the schools. Class sizes would be larger, and so when class sizes get too large, then it actually impacts the quality of education the students are receiving. Certain districts have shuttered sports programs, and then you shutter sports programs because you can't afford to do it, but the families want their kids in sports, so then they take their kids out of that district to a district that does have sports. And so now you're not only losing your sports programs, but the students who would fill those. And because we're funded off of our enrollment, your enrollment then goes down, so now you're getting actually less money. So it just continues to just cascading failures seem to occur, and it's just a really difficult thing to move through.
What would you say to someone who would say, well, why would we want to give them more money? It doesn't seem like they're able to handle what they have now.
Yeah, I don't think
the perception is, something.
Sure.
Because what you're seeing, what you have seen is relatively short. I mean, you have only been here a few months.
Yeah.
So for the perception to ripple out, and maybe the business as it has been, someone could make that case. They say, well, wait a second. Why would we want to almost reward this kind of behavior?
I see what you're saying. I definitely wouldn't look at it as rewarding, or even that we're asking for more. Like I said, in a community like Shelton with a long history of supporting the school district with a levy, those dollars become a relied upon resource to make ends meet and to get the work done. And I mean, when you work in schools, you feel like it's the most important work. That's why you choose this type of profession. And so I understand that viewpoint, but it's not really rewarding because we're not asking for more. We're asking to maintain. That's why it's called a replacement levy, for that reason. And about the previous behaviors, I mean, I wasn't here, so I can't speak to them. All I really know is that we have really made a concentrated effort to reach out to our vendors, to rebuild relationships, to build a plan to get everybody paid on time. And we're moving through that plan. That's why we're ending a negative fund balance previously, and next year we'll end in a positive while paying our bills. And the struggle that all school districts are facing is the cost of labor. And so when we had to move through that RIF, which was really hard to let that number of people go in any capacity, those dollars, some of them, yes, go to savings, but they also get shifted so you can pay your non-salaried costs. And so I wouldn't look at it as rewarding bad behavior because there have been some really hard decisions made to get out of this and a plan laid out. And I am a fan of a plan. So a plan is laid out. We're following that plan and we'll get on the other side of it. And people should notice and see that for sure.
You give updates during the school board meetings?
Yeah,
regularly?
I do. And I think every school board meeting I've offered, if folks have any curiosity around what this looks like, how educational financing works, how the bill paying works, I am happy to get into the weeds about this with anybody. I've done that my whole career. If people are hearing things that don't make any sense, then it's probably not fully accurate. It might be lacking some context. And if you have that weird feeling that like, that doesn't make any sense, why would they do that? I would just reach out to see if we can shore up that misconception and provide additional context to make it make sense. Because that's what I've seen in my life is like, that can't be right. That doesn't make any sense at all. Well, it probably isn't right. So let's get some more information so we figure out what's really going on. And I am more than happy to chat with anybody about whatever.
I'll put your email address here in the show notes on this one. I do appreciate the time. This was a wide variety conversation here on this, but I think kind of clearly explaining a lot of the things that, again, for not everybody in the Shelton School District, whether you have students or you're just within the boundaries, makes it to the meetings or watches them on Mason Web TV, which are both great options. They get a lot of what they hear second, third way via social media these days. And so these types of long conversations are tough to get through and, but important to just explain on a level that, I'm not a finance guy. I don't know any of this stuff, but to be able to hear what you're saying in a way that makes a better understanding, I think kind of puts everyone on a more level playing field. So
yeah, I hope so. I am happy to do it.
Clinton Sherman, Executive Finance Services Director here for the Shelton School District. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day.